Good morning. My name is Steve Aldrich, and I'll introduce everybody from our office and from the state on the call in a minute here. Just to remind you, this Atlas grant is a K-20 educational grant and also education not-for-profit grant to promote geospatial learning and geospatial technology in Indiana. This is a webinar, so we'll hold questions till the end of the presentation, but at that point we can open it up for questions from attendees. And we will be recording this presentation and posting it on the Atlas Grant resource page. So you'll be able to review this later if you had any questions about the program itself. Of course, you can also reach out to us, and we'll be providing contact information as part of this webinar as well. So who's who on this call? So first off, I'm Steve Aldrich. I'm the Deputy Chief Geographic Information Officer for Programs and Outreach for the state of Indiana. Joining me from our office, the Geographic Information Office, is Sarah Distler, who's our GIS Project and Grant Coordinator, Sean Scholler, who's our Imagery and Elevation Subject Matter Expert, and Dan Council, who's our Northern Outreach Coordinator. His counterpart, Rick, couldn't join us today, but he covers the southern part of the state. And then also from the state budget agency, which you might hear us refer to as SBA, is our good friend David Schilling, who's a grants management analyst. So we'll each be presenting parts of this to you today, but I'll kind of keep things going here with just a little bit of an agenda. So first, we're going to talk about our office and kind of what we do, some of our keystone programs. Then we'll talk about the grant program overview and provide some details about the grant. We'll talk in detail about the two different tracks that grants have to identify themselves as belonging to. And then we'll have a brief kind of period to talk about the Unigrants platform, and then we'll open it up for questions. All right, just a little bit of housekeeping. I want to make you aware of a few things that happen in Teams webinars. So on the lower left side of the screen, you can actually zoom ahead or go back and see the slides that we're going to present. There's a button there to sync back to where the presenter is. And your microphones and cameras have been disabled for this portion of the webinar. So we have some time saved at the end for you to come off mute if you want, or type questions in the chat. And you can type questions in the chat along the way, and presenters who are not currently talking might be able to give you an answer to your question in near real time. So thanks for joining us today. All right, so now that we've talked about kind of the housekeeping stuff here, I'd like to turn this over to my colleague, Sean, to talk about our office and some of our key programs.
All right. Thanks, Steve. So, hi, my name's Sean Scholler, and yeah, I was hired 5 years ago to help manage Indiana's imagery and elevation program collection. It's established long before I joined the office, but here just to talk about a few points from our office. You know, our mission was it's a state legislated mandate for what we do, and we developed a 5-year strategic plan that helped identify and move our office forward in the directions that we needed, and that really was based upon those the data framework layers. That's a key piece of what our office does, and also another is just the open data, making sure that the information that we produce is available and readily available for folks, and that helps drive the return on investment, which we will talk about here in just a little bit as well. So here is our office structure. We have two sides of our organization. We have the lead Geographic Information Officer. It's Marianne Cardwell, and then on the left we have Sandeep. He leads our enterprise side, so that he's helping coordinate all of the GIS activities within state agencies, and also supporting our infrastructure, which is vital for how we go about making our information open. And then on the right side we have most of the folks here, or some of the folks on our team, which Steve and myself and others that you can see, and we're dedicated to the outreach of and coordination within all state agencies and also local government. So, all right, well, let's let's talk about some of the programs. And one of the big programs is the Indiana Map. The Indiana Map started actually decades ago from Indiana Geologic Water Surveys, was taken over. We adopted the management of that program this a few years back, integrating Esri's portal environment. So that was a big upgrade to the software behind the scenes, and then also just adding and integrating over 500 maps now that are basically made available through that next bullet point, the collaborative opportunity within the software, within the Esri hub, within the data portal. So we're no longer having to sneakernet or wait till copies get transferred. So you don't have to worry as much about what is the frequency update on that information. As soon as the agency makes those updates, the information's pushed through to the Indiana Map portal. And lastly, a big opportunity for folks is to sign up for these community AGOL accounts. And this is an opportunity for those folks that don't have a license to ArcGIS Online and would like to take advantage of building maps and just getting started with using and integrating and saving their work. So, all right, another program that's really instrumental in our office. It's been around since actually 2007. Was the initiation of the data harvest, and the data harvest was designed around collecting primarily the three layers: parcels, address, and streets across all local governments. It took a few years to get all 92 counties on board, and since then, the communities have voluntarily contributed those data sets and more. Now, in recent, one of the kind of the hidden gems that I like to refer to is the not only is the statewide data set of those layers, it's also the geocoder, that ability to look up addresses across the entire state of Indiana at no cost. So there are always paid services for doing that work. But through this, geocoder, you can, be assured that you're using the best available information across the state. And then lastly, something new that's coming up is the standards. Always, our office is always wanting to make sure that we're keeping up with national standards for addressing and streets and other layers. So that's what. Always considering and coordinating that effort with local government to making sure that they're not surprised at the next year's request. So. And then also the seed grant there that is there for communities to take advantage of opportunities to integrate and make sure that they're meeting the standards. So. And here's my favorite slide, the imagery and elevation program. So again, we've had a long history of collecting imagery and elevation data across the state. We are now up to a base resolution of 3-inch leaf-off imagery. It's 4-band, red, green, blue, and that near infrared is always available for analyzing vegetation and impervious areas. So it's always a wonderful additional attribute there hidden in the imagery layer. So, and then also we have a new layer. So there's always something new that we're looking toward, and that's a leaf-on ortho imagery that comes from the NAEP program. So that's always been that 2-foot raster product, and now we've our office has bought up along with other partners to purchase a 6-inch base product across the entire state. So that will be coming available as well. It's 4-band, and then our elevation program of collecting that quality level 1. So it's has a 10 vertical centimeter accuracy. And 8 points per square meter, so it's a pretty high density, and then we'll also have the DM, that digital elevation model, available. So those be on the lookout for those products. And here, just a nice example of being able to see the difference between, I didn't even include the 12-inch, but just seeing the difference between 6 and 3-inch is quite remarkable. So there's a lot more visibility that we have now with this higher resolution imagery, and also the accuracy is improved, continually improves as well as we increase resolution. So here I'd like to spend just a little bit of time talking about our outreach efforts. So another main point, our office used to be a staff of 1, 2, or 3 people there in the early days back in 2008, 2009. And at that time, the Geographic Information Officer recognized the need to making sure that we coordinated our efforts across the state. So they would oftentimes refer to these as roadshow meetings, and have them around the different regions of the state. And you can imagine it was a hard effort, right, for that new staff. And now we have the dedicated staff of Rick and Dan working with local governments and regional governments to promote, educate, and promote our office activities. And the big thing is that these Rick and Dan are their efforts are an attempt to reduce those kind of blind spots of agencies collecting the same data, or building bigger projects by coordinating across the county and corporate boundaries. So on the next slide is our office impacts, and you can read the numbers. I like to think of this as there's kind of 3 levels of savings or effort, and that first is kind of that in reducing and focusing on reducing the internal labor efforts, right? Of the planning and the engineer from one community and the planning officer from another, or state agency, kind of looking to collect that same information and trying to work through similar workflows. Another is the duplication in vendor procurement. So, whereas counties or would maybe collect aerial photography in a city within that same county would collect aerial photography, or the state, and that's where now with our office managing the statewide collect, we are providing that imagery and these data sets available. So, and then also kind of probably the worst, is that making poor decisions based on incomplete or inaccurate information. So that's where I think of the data harvest layers, right, coming together as a single source of truth for folks to be able to rely on in order to make their decisions. So, all right, with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So moving on, the reason why I imagine everybody is here, talk about the ALICE grant. So we'll go over what it is, the mission, and then some more details, how to apply, and then some of the funding information. So we created this grant with educators in mind. The ALICE grant is designed to empower colleges, universities, and K through 12 organizations, and really anybody dealing with education. So that could also include nonprofits. The mission of this grant, there's a few points here we like to highlight: advancing geospatial research, enhancing the accessibility of data. So with these projects, the goal is to make the end products accessible to anybody, open, promoting best practices in geographic data management and analysis, and then ensuring effective use and understanding of geographic data and concepts across various disciplines. So overall, this grant was created for education in mind, and this is the second year, I should say, that we're doing this grant. So last year was our first time ever offering the grant, and we're already seeing some really cool results, and we're excited to see what happens next. So a few goals in mind with the grant: supporting the creation of scalable, repeatable, and practical tools. So again, that's supporting people who could use this funding to create tools that could be reused, and especially when they're applicable to our framework data. So we mentioned earlier, those data sets are the streets, addresses, imagery, parcels. So really those core key data sets that are very relevant in our state. Second goal here is supporting development of educational materials. So that could be creating lesson plans, really anything that could be used by students or anybody across the state to enhance their geospatial knowledge. And then the last goal here, supporting projects that enable geospatial data sets to be easily accessible and optimized for storage in our open data environment. So supporting, projects that make data more accessible to everybody, and overall supporting open data. So who can apply? Kind of mentioned this, academic institutions, nonprofits, schools, and school districts. I think Steve put the link to our website in the chat, but there's some more details on eligibility there. Overall, it's really anybody related to education. So again, that also includes nonprofits. So not just universities and schools. And I think with that, I'll pass it off to Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Dan. The Indiana Geographic Information Office allocated $150,000 of our state appropriated funds for the fiscal years 2026 and 2027. Each year, the program will target up to 4 awards. These awards will be of varied amounts, but the total amount awarded will not exceed $150,000 per fiscal year. It is possible for multiple awards to be awarded to the same institute if multiple distinct projects involving different personnel are selected for an award. Individuals involved in these projects may be co-PIs on multiple grants, but not be the lead on more than one Atlas grant. The budget for the grant will be completed in the Unigrants portal during the application process. More information about completing the budget and the Unigrants application process will be explained during the SBA webinar. This slide shows the allowable costs for this grant. When completing the grant, we ask if you could please be sure to provide details of the cost calculations in the budget narrative, and that will make more sense once you've attended the SBA training webinar and you can actually see the budget form and the place for that narrative. More information about completing the budget will be provided during the SBA training webinars. Not all travel will be reimbursed. Reimbursable travel must be directly related to the grant and essential to the success of the grant. Allowable travel might include site visits to interact with trainees or having meetings to discuss technology implementation. Traveling to an international conference to present the results of your Atlas grant would probably not be covered. Indirect costs are allowed, but are capped at 10% of modified direct costs. If your institution has an overhead rate of, say, 58%, we would not be able to cover that 58%, instead would allow up to 10%. This slide shows the Atlas grant timeline. The application period opens on August 3rd and will close on September 10th. We will be sending out award notifications on October 13th. The awardee acceptance deadline is October 23rd. We anticipate the performance period will begin on January 29th, 2027 and will end on January 29th, 2028. The awardees must accept the award by the deadline to receive the grant. The performance period cannot begin until the grant contract is executed, approved, and subrecipients are going to have 1 year from the beginning of the performance period to complete the project. Applicants are eligible to apply in multiple years. The Atlas grant is a reimbursement-based grant. We require activity and financial reporting at 2 points during the grant period. We ask for an activity and financial report at the midpoint and at the closeout. Each of those reports will be due within 30 days of that midpoint or closeout period. The activity report will be submitted through the UniGrant Solution platform. The financial report is also the reimbursement request. I encourage you to attend the SBA training sessions. You will see how to convert a financial report into a request for reimbursement. At the point where you can submit the reimbursement request and the activity reports, you can request 50% of your budget if you have completed 50% of your project's work. We have received a few questions about the Atlas grant, and I would like to cover what we've received so far. If you have any questions, we'll have some contact information later, and you'll be able to submit those questions to us. One question we received is, can each awardee receive the maximum amount of $150,000? And the answer is no. The total program per fiscal year will only total $150,000. We are going to have a target of up to 4 awards, and those are going to be of varied amounts, but we will not award more than $150,000 because that is our total budget. Second question, will the IGIO accept more than one proposal from a single institution? Yes, we will accept multiple proposals, and we may even award multiple awards to a single institution, again, assuming that these are distinct projects with co-PIs on multiple grants, but not being lead PI on more than one. Does the grant allow for travel expenses such as conference travel? The answer to this one is maybe. It will be considered on a case-by-case basis. Another question that we received is, will MPOs be eligible? MPOs are metropolitan planning organizations, and the answer is no. The only eligible applicants are schools, academic institutions, and nonprofit organizations. A government entity is not eligible to apply. And with that, I will pass it over to Steve to talk more about the Atlas grant tracks, Navigate, and Maps.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. So the Atlas grant program has two tracks, and when you submit an Atlas grant, you have to be very explicit about which track your project fits under. So I'll describe what these tracks are right now. So we have 2 tracks. One is Navigate and the other is Maps. So Navigate stands for Nurturing Academic Vision in Geospatial and Technological Education. And the purpose of this track is really to develop educational materials or geospatial knowledge, training programs for Indiana residents that really incorporate geospatial thinking and geographic knowledge into educational settings. So you can think of this as, I think Dan mentioned an example of lesson planning, right? Or a curriculum, or even something like a camp, where it's really about educating people about spatial thinking and geospatial techniques. The other track is Maps, this modern applications for processing spatial data. And the purpose here is to create tools that are scalable and practical that allow better use of Indiana's framework geospatial data. And these projects might be enhancing access or enhancing the data themselves. And really the idea is to make a tool or a set of tools that a broad swath of the population can use to understand the areas around them better. Also, in the Maps track, the idea is that projects might also or instead enable access to or optimize our open geospatial data, either on Indiana Map or in some of the other kind of technical places where we store data. So the Navigate track, and remember, this is the educational materials or geospatial thinking kind of track. The intent here is to expand geospatial thinking across the curriculum in Indiana, and that curriculum could be in formal settings or informal settings. And really, it's about Indiana-focused geospatial training resources or workshops for Hoosiers. So some example projects that we were kind of envisioning would fit into a Navigate track, and I mention these as examples, not as things that we're like, please make a proposal about this that's what's going to be funded, not other stuff. These are just examples, right? Would be something like development of educational materials that focus on geospatial thinking, hosting statewide geospatial education events, or maybe hosting challenges, technical challenges, sort of like, can you create a tool or can you solve this problem, right? That encourage innovative uses of geospatial data, or maybe establishing mentorship programs that link, young career professionals or emerging professionals with more established professionals in a geospatial field, or something like a series of kind of career aids or something like that. The MAPS track is very different. The strategic intent here is to develop innovative tools and user-friendly tools that optimize the value that's already embedded in Indiana's open geospatial data assets. So the idea of the MAPS track is that there might be tools or processes that really allow the state or people in the state to derive new insights from data we already have. Also in this track, any kind of project that might improve access, either for making it easier to use the data, or maybe improving it for access for certain populations, would be definitely an appropriate MAPS track sort of project. And really, we'd like projects in this track to implement scalable kind of cloud-based solutions that are based on FAIR principles. And FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So some example projects that we could dream up here, but again, not saying that these are the only sorts of things that we would consider, might include a project that used machine learning to identify previously unrecognized pattern in the open framework data that Indiana offers. Perhaps maybe the creation of online data visualization and data dissemination tools to improve use of data by public entities and the general populace in Indiana. Maybe creating automated workflows for data extraction or classification of remotely sensed data, like from our imagery and elevation program, would be an example of an interesting project. Or developing solutions that are really in the IT space that might optimize data publishing, data hosting, and data dissemination throughout state infrastructure. All right, and with that, I would like to pass this along to my good friend David to talk briefly about the UniGrant management platform and maybe dispel some of your fears about yet another online platform. David?
Awesome. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Steve. Excuse me. Yeah, as Steve mentioned, UniGrants is really a very nice platform to use. The best thing about it is its simplicity. It really is very intuitive, and it's an easy way for you to be able to manage your grant, apply for your grant, build a collaborative work environment too. That's what's really nice about it, is that you'll be submitting your application using UniGrants, the UniGrants portal. But then once you're awarded this grant, you'll actually be able to build a team there where you'll be able to collaborate when it comes to submitting those financial reports, which are reimbursement requests, basically. And keeping up with communications with everyone, monitoring what's being done. Excuse me. Again, it's a simple, easy platform to use. The good thing is, too, is the SBA is here to help you no matter where you are in the process. Whether you're applying for the grant, whether you're managing those grants, we have user guides, we have training videos available on the website 24/7. So we're always going to be here to be able to support you guys no matter where you are. We kind of like to say that the UniGrants portal is as easy to use as Amazon. So if you've ordered off of Amazon, you can handle using the UniGrants platform. It's just as easy, but way cheaper. The big thing to watch out for, you guys, are those webinars coming up, okay? And that's where we're going to kind of walk you through the platform, show you exactly how you can find that application, how you can apply for those grants, and then we'll get into, excuse me, how you'll be able to manage those grants and take advantage of all the different things that the platform has to offer. So please do keep an eye out for those webinars coming up. They're super beneficial. We'll record those. But I really think that you guys will find that the platform is a very easy, manageable platform to use. It is very intuitive. That's its best selling point. And we're here to support you no matter where you are in the process. So actually really looking forward to working with you guys here in the future.
Thanks, David. Finally, we'd like to close with just overviewing some resources that are available to you if you're interested in applying for the Atlas grant. So we kind of got resources from both our office and from SBA. So resources from our office include the Atlas grant webpage. I put the link in the chat. You can also, if you have questions that crop up as you're developing your project or maybe submitting it on Unigrants and you've got some grant-related questions, we have a grant email that goes to a number of us on this call. It's giogrants@iot.in.gov. So if you send a message there, I'll get it, Rick will get it, Dan will get it, and I think even Sarah will get it, and we could answer those questions for you, 4 sets of eyes on your question about the grant. But also, as David mentioned, SBA has resources about kind of in general state level grants, right? And so the next level grant management resources for subrecipients page is a great place to go to learn more about how you can acquire state grant funding. SBA also has grant office hours every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time, where you can join in and ask questions about your grant management or grant submission woes, if you have any, which you probably won't because the platform is pretty straightforward. And then there are other state grant opportunities besides just the Atlas grant, and you can see those listed at the state agency grant opportunities webpage. And as I finish this, I'll put some links in the chat to each one of these resources for you to check out. David mentioned there's some upcoming webinars. So we do have this webinar that we're doing right now, and that is today. But on the 16th of July, there will be an SBA pre-award webinar at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and this is really where David will help us dig into how you actually create a Unigrants account, apply for the Atlas grant through the Unigrants platform. And this is the target audience here is anybody who's actually doing the button clicking of submitting the grant. So if you happen to work for a university or maybe a school district that has a grants coordinator, you might not be the one who's clicking those buttons to actually submit the grant. You're developing the project and passing it off to them for the grant management part. So if you have that person in your organization, you might want to share this SBA pre-award webinar information with them. You can see this if you go to in.gov/GIS and look for the calendar on that main page that's on that calendar if you're curious of details on how to join. There will also be a post-award webinar, which is yet to be scheduled, which will cover how to interact with Unigrants if you're successful in your Atlas grant application. And that's only for awarded grantees. A meeting link will be set out to grantees who've received an award through the Atlas grant program at that time, right? So just keep those things in mind. But obviously, if you have any questions, the resources of the GIO grants at iot.in.gov email is a great place to send questions. You can reach out to any of us individually as well. And the Atlas grant webpage, which I put a link to it in the chat, is a great place to go to. So with that, we are done with the us talking at you part of the webinar. If you have any questions, you can come off of mute. I think I can allow you to do that and ask any questions you might have. So give me a moment to allow folks to unmute themselves and ask questions. And I will also put those resources in the chat as I promised. All right. So Kristen sent a message. Can you share how many applications you received last year or the number of applications expected this year? Absolutely. We received 17 Atlas grant applications last year, and we were, everyone or almost everyone was an excellent, if we had unlimited resources, we would have funded it kind of a project. There were some really great projects sent in. In the end, we were only able to fund 5 of the 17. So for an inaugural year of a grant program like this, we were pleasantly surprised by the level of interest. And I think that speaks to, kind of the fact that we all have good ideas that we would like to, that we need support for. And so We would expect this year to get maybe a similar number of applicants and perhaps be able to fund a similar number, but it really depends on how many applications come in and what their level of quality is, because we do go through a review process. And then, you know, what those budget requests are, because there is no minimum or really maximum budget. So if we got many really good but low budget projects, we'd be able to fund more. If we get many high budget projects, we will probably only be able to fund, you know, 2 or 3 or 4. So it kind of comes down to how those projects rate according to our review criteria, which you can see in the notice of funding opportunity on the SBA website, which I will put the links to those in the chat in a second. And then also what we can accommodate from our budgeting standpoint. These are state dollars and they come out of our appropriation. And at this point in our budget, we have $150,000 total to award in this grant period. And that's across all grants that we would fund. So thanks for that question, Kristen. Any other questions? Let me grab those resources that I can paste into the chat. Absolutely, Kristen. I'm happy to help. All right, so the last link I put in the chat has the link to the Notice of Funding Opportunity, the NOFO, and in there's quite a bit of detail about how kind of every stage of this grant will work from a grants management standpoint. It is not a Unigrants how-to manual. It is an Atlas Grant how-to manual. But if you have any questions about any of this, please reach out to GIO grants at iot.in.gov, and I'll give another couple of minutes here for questions that people might have. Otherwise, we appreciate you attending the webinar today. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting now. But again, GIO grants at iot.in.gov is a great way if you've got any questions or concerns to reach out to us. Thanks a lot and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, everybody.